3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. So it is cited by Gandalf the wizard.
J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is one of the most enchanting and successful tales of all time. First issued in the 1950s, this famous trilogy could just as well have emanated from the Dark Ages or medieval times, for it has all the qualities and attributes of the most ancient Grail and Ring traditions. This was made possible by the fact that Tolkien, an Oxford professor of Anglo-Saxon and English language, had the legendary wealth of age at his fingertips and molded his story accordingly. As a result, his masterwork became the most popular individual publication of the 20th century. The Ring Quest has a history that dates far back into the mists of time, beyond the pyramids of Egypt and the walls of Babylon. It has lived on through the era of the pagan gods and has seen the rise of Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad. Remarkably, its traditions and allegories remain alive and intact to this day, evoking the imagery of a long-distant past. Despite the many centuries of church and governmental indoctrination designed to sway us from the quest, its enlightened truths draw hard upon our collective memory. Consequently, the difference between fiction and suppressed fact is inherently recognizable, and the ancient lore sits very comfortably in today's environment, having, as we shall see, a perpetual moral truth at its heart. In considering the history of the Ring Quest, its parallel association with the Grail Quest becomes increasingly apparent, as do the origins of fairies, elves, pixies, sprites, gnomes, and goblins. Ring lore is also deeply rooted in many of the best-loved nursery tales and provides the essential facts behind numerous time-honored characters of popular legend. Grail stories are generally associated with Arthurian knights roaming the wasteland in search of the sacred relic, but the genre also embodies many other questing tales, incorporating such characters as Cinderella, Robin Hood, Sleeping Beauty, and Count Dracula. Each account holds its own separate mystery and fascination, but it is not generally understood that, in one way or another, they all stem from a common historical base which is rooted in the ancient culture of the Ring Lords. Even though some of the themes have their origins in very old lore, the majority of these tales were newly slanted from the Dark Ages onwards, when the Church set its sights against the Ring tradition. This was especially the case from medieval times when the persecution of heretics was in full swing, leading to the brutal inquisitions which began in the 13th century. From the earliest of Sumerian and Scythian times, over 5,000 years ago, the abiding symbol of the Ring Lords was the ring, a representation of wholeness, unity, and eternity. Often identified as an Ouroboros, a serpent clutching its own tail, with a cross positioned beneath the ring, it becomes the familiar device of the female, the Venus symbol. Alternatively, with a cross positioned above the ring, it becomes the masculine orb of sovereign regalia. With the cross positioned within the ring, it symbolizes the Holy Grail itself, identified as the Rosy Crucis, the dew cup or cup of the waters. Hence, as confirmed by Professor Tolkien, along with the poet Alfred, Lord Tennyson, and the composer Richard Wagner, the Grail and the Ring are closely affiliated and, in some measure, synonymous. The Rosy Crucis emblem is recorded as far back as 3500 BC in Mesopotamia, and it has long been the distinguishing device of the Sangreal, the Blood Royal, or Holy Grail, whose supporters became known as Rosicrucians. Though traditionally referred to by the Church as the Mark of Cain, this device is in fact the original and longest-standing mark of sovereignty. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, the early kings of the succession were called dragons because they were anointed with the sacred fat of a large monitor called the Mos Tisur Mesa, see figure on page 7. From this derived the Hebrew stem MSSH, which gave rise to the verb mashiach, to anoint. Thus, the kings were also called messiahs, meschiacs, anointed ones. In the Gaelic world, the overall kings of kings were known as pendragons, head dragons, and from the earliest times, they were also styled ring lords by virtue of their rings of office, which symbolized divinely inspired justice. Although the messianic bloodline of the Sangrealists believed to descend from Jesus and his family, the fact is that the Grail dynasty began more than 3 millennia before the Gospel era. As an hereditary emblem, the rosy crucis represented the linear blood of the messianic succession held within the vas uterine chalice, the womb of the Grail Queen. The dragon, being emblematic of wisdom, was the epitome of the Holy Spirit which moved upon the waters of time, while the Grail was the perpetual blood of the succession. Originally called the J.R.R. in Old Mesopotamia, the maternal blood of the rosy crucis was said to be the nectar of supreme excellence, and the Greeks called it ambrosia. Tolkien's ring. For all practical purposes, the mythology of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings can perhaps be seen as an intuitive parable of governmental suppression and of the combative quest for liberty and justice. It is essentially a tale of territorial lordship and of power vested in the wrong hands, a dark power which has to be destroyed in order to return the wounded Middle-earth to its former equanimity. In its own way, the story is entirely reminiscent of the central precept of Grail lore, which determines that only when the wound of the Fisher King is healed can the wasteland be returned to fertility. Tolkien's story begins with Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who has acquired a magic ring that can render its wearer invisible. Having bequeathed it to his heir, Frodo Baggins, Bilbo promptly vanishes on his 111th birthday. Gandalf the wizard is concerned because he believes the ring to have been made long ago by the evil Lord Sauron, and that it is having a negative effect on the Middle-earth environment, where the once sublime forest of Greenwood the Great is beset by oppressive forces to become known as Mirkwood. Bilbo had originally purloined the ring from a strange underground creature called Gollum, and, on testing it, Gandalf discovers that it is certainly the ring of Sauron, the One Ring, which binds various others within its ultimate power. Meanwhile, the dark forces have been driven out of the forest by the elves, but they now gather to the east in Sauron's land of Mordor, where they plot to retrieve the ring. There is only one way to destroy the Ring of Power, and that is to cast it into the fire in which it was forged on the Mount of Doom. And so Bilbo's young cousin Frodo and a few hobbits embark on the dangerous journey. Along the way they are attacked by the Black Riders, but also meet with friendly elves, and with Aragorn, King of Gondor, who conducts them to the White Council of Elves and Dwarves, where they learn about the Great War against Sauron. Frodo and the hobbits, forming a fellowship with Gandalf and Aragorn, pursue their course to dispose of the ring, but Gandalf is soon lost to the abyss in a battle, leaving the group without their wizard. At this, a conflict ensues over who should be the leader, and Frodo disappears with the ring to the Land of Shadows. The others set out to find him, but they are now in dispute about their purpose because the dark powers are working against them. Various members of the Fellowship are lost in a battle against the hostile orcs, leaving only Aragorn and 2 others in the search for Frodo. Later, they meet again with Gandalf, who has returned from the underworld to defeat his one-time chief, the wizard Saruman, who has joined forces with the dark powers and the orcs. Meanwhile, Frodo and his colleague Sam have reached the land of Mordor, but Frodo is paralyzed by Shelob the giant spider and seized by the orcs. In Aragorn's land of Gondor, the regent Denethor is preparing for war against the forces of Mordor, but Sauron's magic is too powerful and Gondor is overrun, saved only by the timely return of King Aragorn and his rangers. Sam, in the meantime, has managed to rescue Frodo from the orcs, and the pair make their way to the Mount of Doom with the ring on Frodo's finger. But the ring now has Frodo in its grasping power, and he cannot hurl it into the hellfire. The strange Gollum, whom Bilbo had first encountered, then reappears to take back the ring. He bites off Frodo's finger, but slips and topples headlong into the inferno. And so the ring is finally returned to where it was forged, at which the Mount of Doom erupts in a final blaze of destruction, and Sauron's dark land of Mordor is demolished for all time. On returning home after a meeting with Gandalf and Aragorn, the hobbits Frodo and Sam find their Shire in the grip of the wizard Saruman, but he is soon overcome and the land is restored. With the Great War and its era of darkness at an end, Frodo and Gandalf then join together for the last time as they leave Middle-earth and sail westward to the white shores beyond the sea.